Okay. Well, this is kind of a bad frame to have it all there. I've tried to film chapter 20 now several times and kept getting interrupted by my wee animals, which they were adorable, but not really conducive. Well, that did absolutely nothing to trying to do this. So it's tilted, but oh well. Deal with it. We are back with Catalyst by Lisa Beeson. Chapter 20. Oh, don't start. Don't start. No. Silencio. S'il vous plaît. Alrighty. Chapter 20. Lunch was a casual affair of soups and sandwiches, since they were busy preparing special dishes for Mara's arrival that evening. Ari felt good to be able to hold her own tray and take it to the table on her own. It was nice to be independent again. All the kids, except for Val, who was again a no-show, sat at their usual table and were still joking around and teasing each other about the upcoming game. The adults sat at the other tables around them and were caught up talking about getting everything ready before Mara arrived. After the twins got up to go ask Corey and Nina for dessert, Ari turned to Claudia. Did I say before? I don't know. After the twins got up to go ask Corey and Nina for dessert, Ari turned to Claudia, wanting to know more about the twins' infamous grandmother, and asked, "So what's Mara like?" Claudia shrugged. "She's all right, I guess. She's definitely stricter than Gordon. She runs her place more like a military barracks than an actual community like Gordon does with this place. I like it here much better," she said, giving Cam a flirty look and leaning into him. Looking away, Ari noticed Alvaro's eyes were unfocused as he sat frozen in place, and it reminded her of what Sadie would look like when she was having one of her seizures. Ari was about to connect to him mentally to see what he was seeing, but he suddenly snapped out of his trance and abruptly grabbed his tray and stood up. "I gotta go," he mumbled as he walked away, dumping the remnants of his food in the bin and putting his tray on the rack. He practically ran out of the room. "Must be another vision," Joshua said with a shrug. "Or he's already going up to hide in his room. He always holes up in there when Mara, the Ice Queen, comes around. She intimidates the crap out of him," Taika said with a smirk. "He's such a wuss sometimes." "You would be too if you saw what he sees every day," Ari thought. But she kept the comment to herself. Taika was just being an annoying 12-year-old boy, trying to act tough around the older kids. And Alvaro was an easy target. "Ugh," Ellie said with a groan and a roll of her eyes. "She's going to be bringing Gregory and Blake with her, isn't she?" she asked rhetorically. "Who are Gregory and Blake?" Ari asked before starting in on her third sandwich. "They're her sons, and she never goes anywhere without them," Claudia answered. "Gregory's her eldest and acts as her personal assistant and bodyguard. He has a similar ability to the other Reinholds, but he can actually make a physical barrier, like a shield." Ari and Cam quickly glanced at each other out of the corner of their eyes, both thinking about the force field she had made yesterday up in the greenhouse. "He's a bit haughty and intense, but he's fine," Claudia continued. "It's Blake you've got to stay away from if you can," she warned. "He's a telepath, kind of like you, but he's not as polite about reading people's thoughts and going through their memories as you are." "Seriously?" Ari said, appalled. "Yeah, the guy's a troll," Taika said with a look of disgust. "The last time they were here, he kept looking at me like he knew all of my deepest, darkest secrets," Ellie said with a far-off look and a shudder. "So I took Skylar's advice and filled my mind with something else and started singing the lyrics to Justin Bieber's song Baby in my head every time he was around. and eventually he started avoiding me. That's the one where he just keeps saying baby over and over again, right? Cam said with a chuckle. Pretty much, Ellie grinned. Skylar told you to do that? Ari asked. One moment. Ellie nodded. She said that's what she and Soren did before they came here. Ari felt a pang of sympathy for her poor minions. Mara usually keeps him in check, Joshua said, and then turned to Ellie. But if he does that to you this time, just let me know, and I'll set him straight. He shouldn't be messing with you like that. Ellie couldn't keep herself from smiling as she looked down into her soup bowl and nodded that she would. Ari and Claudia glanced knowingly at each other and tried to hide their grins. Then Ari asked, "Does she have a husband?" Everyone snickered, and Ari looked around questioningly. What? I can't imagine the type of guy that could handle being Mara's husband. She'd rule him with an iron fist, Ellie said, shaking her head. Even though Gordon's older than her, whenever she comes here, she orders everyone around like she's the boss. Why do you think everyone's all worked up about getting things ready for her? And as to the father of her children, Claudia said, leaning in closer conspiratorially, there is none, at least not in the traditional sense. She was artificially inseminated all 3 times. Gross, I'm still eating, Taika complained, his face screwed up in disgust. Dessert is double-fudge brownies and ice cream today, Skylar chirped cheerfully as she and Soren came back to the table and sat down on either side of Ari, their presence effectively shutting down the conversation. Their plates were stacked with brownies and scoops of homemade vanilla ice cream. Soren had gotten a plate for Ari as well and placed it in front of her. Thanks, little man, she said, eyeing the plate eagerly. But before she could dig in, Alvaro came back and tapped her lightly on the shoulder. Hey, Ari, can I talk to you for a sec? She turned around to see him holding his sketchbook, pointing at it with the eraser of his pencil, to signal that his vision apparently had to do with her. Sure, she said as she quickly got up and shoved her plate over to Cam. Here you go. I'll see you all later for a dodgeball game, she said before following Alvaro out of the dining hall. What's up? She asked as Alvaro led her down the hallway. In response, he just held his finger up to his mouth and motioned for her to keep following. When they were a sufficient distance away so as not to be overheard by anyone, Alvaro stopped and opened his sketchbook. He flipped through the pages until he reached a sketch showing a bear and an eagle battling against a large, evil-looking serpent with crimson eyes. There were 4 hatch marks in the corner of the page. I saw this last week, then today when I first woke up, then after breakfast, and again just a couple minutes ago. I've never had the same vision so many times in the same day before, he said, looking up at her worriedly. What do you think it means? Ari asked. All the good feelings and excitement over getting her new leg were immediately eclipsed by the familiar weight of dread. Alvaro shrugged uncertainly. I don't know. The bear and the eagle are fighting as fiercely as they can, but it always seems like the serpent's winning. He scanned around the hall real quick and then lowered his voice. And every time I see that vision, at the end I see the statue of you with the one black eye and one wide eye, saying, I am the catalyst. Ari ran her hand through her hair and leaned despairingly against the wall, trying to think it all over. What could this possibly mean? And why are the bear and the eagle a reoccurring theme in visions of me? Do you think it could represent our fight against the Red Death virus? I mean, the symbol for the rod of Asclepius, whatever it is, has a serpent in it and stands for healing and medicine. Alvaro sighed. There's serpent symbolism from cultures all around the world from the beginning of time. The Sumerians, the Norse, the Egyptians, African tribes, Mayans, Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, Judeo-Christian theology. They all have mythology around serpents with both good and evil connotations. It's ridiculous how many things it could possibly mean. He started naming them off alphabetically to prove his point, and counting them off on his fingers. Androgyny, cycles, convalescence, creation, cunning, danger, death, deceit, destruction, divinity, evil, false appearance, fertility, guardianship, grief, health, intelligence, jealousy, lasciviousness, malice, misfortune, physicians, power, prophecy, renewal, revenge, self-indulgence, self-sustenance, sensuality, sin, temptation, treachery, the universe, vice, willness, wisdom, and witchcraft, he said, slightly winded from listing them all. Okay then, she said, taken aback by his extensive knowledge on the subject. So that's a maybe on the virus thing? She tried to joke, but he wasn't having it and moved on like she hadn't said anything. But throughout the different mythologies, the serpent is often depicted with or affiliated to some form of the tree of life, which makes me think of the tree that keeps popping up in association with you, he said, thinking it over, and then grunted in frustration. God, it's all right there in front of us, like a word that's just on the tip of your tongue. For once, I wish I could just have some straightforward visions when it comes to you, instead of all this symbolic garbage. Sorry, Ari said with a shrug, at a loss for words. She wanted some straightforward answers for once, too. It's not your fault, he said absently. Well, we can keep thinking on it, and maybe you'll have another clearer vision later. Yeah, maybe, he said, looking down at the floor dispiritedly. But then his head popped back up. Oh, I forgot to tell you. The Mad Hatter and the music symbols are starting to pop up again. I've seen it a couple times this week. What? Her heart sank. The shades haven't given up. Did you talk to Val about it? Pfft, he said dismissively. Val's not talking to anyone, let alone me. I told Hugo about it, though, so the adults know to look out for it. Knowing Val, that wouldn't be enough. She needed to know not to make herself vulnerable to them again. Well, maybe you can write her a note and shove it under her door or something, Ari suggested. She needs to know. Okay, he said reluctantly, and then changed the subject. Hey, remember that guy holding the American flag in the vision? The one on top of the pile of bones with all the regular people on it? Ari nodded, picturing the man's face. Ends up, he's a Louisiana senator, and he's running for president. Well, I guess we know who's going to win then, Ari said with a smirk. Yeah, well, judging on how those people looked underneath him, I'm not confident in his leadership capabilities, Alvaro said with a grimace. Have you checked the news today? Ari shook her head. I haven't had a chance yet. The mystery terrorists attacked an oil drilling company based in North Dakota last night, right after they hacked into the company's files. Everyone is flipping out that they were able to do this on American soil without leaving a trace. It's insane. Who the heck are these guys? Ari asked, baffled. Everything they attack seems to be at random. Usually terrorists have some kind of purpose, no matter how messed up it is. Do you think they're anarchists or something? Alvaro shrugged. There you guys are, Taika said, running towards them. Come on, let's go help Wyatt set up for the match. I'll be there in a minute. I gotta go do something first, Alvaro said, glancing at Ari to tell her he was going to go write that note to Val, and she nodded in thanks back to him. All right, Taika said warily, but don't wuss out on us. We need every man we can get. I won't, Alvaro assured them before taking off in the other direction. Val was just about to get on the elevator to go back up to her room when she saw Alvaro already standing there waiting for it. Suck. She was so tired, and she really didn't want to lug her guitar case all the way up the stairs, but it looked like she was going to have to. Pivoting on her heel, she hoped Alvaro hadn't spotted her, as she tried to sneak towards the stairs. Hey, Val, wait up! Suck. Leave me alone, Al, she warned without breaking her stride. Wait, I have something to tell you, he said, catching up to her. Hey, you look awful. Val shot him a scathing glare. Just what a girl likes to hear. Thanks for pointing that out. Oblivious to his faux pas, Alvaro asked, Why are you taking your guitar out of your chill-out room? I'm allowed to take my instruments wherever the hell I want, she said acidly. I don't have to answer to you. I know, he said, sounding abashed. It's just, you don't normally do that. That's all, he stammered. Val ignored him as he started up the black wrought iron stairs case, hoping he'd take the hint and keep his distance. If she really was infected with that crazy virus, she didn't want it spreading around before she had a chance to get the hell out of there. But the kid was persistent and continued to follow her after her anyway. Val, I've been seeing the Mad Hatter again. The words crawled under her skin and almost made her miss the next step. She was able to recover smoothly. This is good, she tried to convince herself. Maybe this just means I'll be able to score some tonight. Hunter and that other chick are dead, so whatever happened that night can't happen again. Good to know, she said dismissively as she continued up past the second level. Now go away. But again, the kid wouldn't give up and followed after her. Every time I have that vision, it comes with a feeling of warning. Nothing good is associated with that logo, Val. It feels dark. That gave her pause, thinking about the oily darkness of her nightmares. But she couldn't back down now. Everything was already set into motion, and her physical need for the drug was getting unbearable. Duly noted, she said tonelessly as she continued up past the third level. You're not even listening, are you? He accused, actually sounding upset. You didn't listen to me last time, and look what happened to you. Stop being so damn bullheaded for once and actually listen. Val stopped to look back at him curiously. She'd never heard him sound this worked up before. She'd never seen him be anything but a meek little worried mouse. But here he was actually being passionate about something, and it intrigued her. I didn't even want to tell you because I knew you'd brush me off like you always do, like you do to everyone. But Ari wanted me to let you know, so I'm doing this for her. And even if you don't give a damn about your own safety, at least take heed for her sake, because the vision has to do with her too. Suck. What could that logo have anything to do with her? The hell if I know, but heaven help you if anything happens to her because of you, he said, pointing at her threateningly, and she saw the lion hiding behind the mousy exterior. So that's what this is all about. He couldn't give a crap about me. He's just worried about Ari. You really like her, don't you? She said with a snide smirk. Of course I like her. Everyone does. She's an incredibly likable person. He said as though it was obvious. But then his eyes took on an almost dreamy look. The way she looks at people, like she actually sees them, truly understands them. It's refreshing and beautiful. She knew exactly what he meant. The hell if she was going to tell him so. Sorry, but you ain't got a chance, gypsy boy, she said, looking him critically up and down. Even with all her scars and only one leg, you're nowhere near Stumpy's league. Val held up her hands to emphasize the drastic height difference between him and Ari. You don't think I know that? He shouted. You don't even understand. No one is in her league. And by the way, you can't call her Stumpy anymore because she got her new leg this morning. You know that if you ever got your head out of your ass. But no, you don't care about anybody but yourself. And why shouldn't I? She said defensively. Nobody else does. That's bull and you know it. We want to care for you, but your constant bitchiness and relentless efforts to push everyone away makes it impossible. You know, you're not the only person who's been through. You have absolutely no idea what I've been through, she interrupted. So save the sermon. She turned back around to make her way up the rest of the stairs. She didn't need to hear this crap. I do, Val. I saw it. She froze mid-step and peered back over her shoulder at him. Saw what? Stan. Saw what? Stan. Alvaro had said it softly, and not unkindly, but the sound of Stan's name made her whole body flinch as though he'd hit her. Why do you think you came up here to Scion's Keep? He asked. I saw what you did and why. Then I told Gordon, and he thought we could help. Just the thought of Stan ignited her rage, and it began to blaze through her. She couldn't stop it. She needed to end this conversation now before she did something she'd regret. I don't want anyone's help or pity, so just leave me the hell alone. She started jogging the rest of the way up the stairs to the 4th level. She needed to get away before the rumbling started. Alvaro was annoying as hell, but she didn't want to hurt him. Fine, he said, throwing his hands up in exasperation. Do whatever the hell you want. I'm done wasting my breath on you. It's not worth it. He turned and stomped back down the stairs. Exactly, Val thought bitterly before slamming her door. The dodgeball teams were lined up on either side of the court, awaiting the whistle to start the match. With Hugo, George, Joshua, Ellie, Taika, and Alvaro on Cam's team, versus Miles, Ari, Skylar, Wyatt, Claudia, and Corey on Marin's team. They would be pretty evenly matched if Ari wasn't playing. Maya agreed to referee with Soren as her assistant, while the other adults were busy preparing for Mara and her son's arrival. Okay, everybody, listen up, Maya called out for everyone to hear. We're doing 3 rounds. No headshots. Don't step over the lines. If the ball hits you, you're out until next round. But what about resurrections? Taika objected. No resurrections. Wyatt gave me the whistle. Whistle equals power. What I say goes, she said, eyeing him warily. Moving on. If you catch the ball thrown at you, the thrower is out. You can block an oncoming ball with the ball you are holding, but you can't hold a ball for more than 10 seconds or it's considered a dead ball. Soren will help be my eyes, she said, glancing down at him, and he smiled and nodded shyly. So don't try any funny business, she eyed Taika again. What? He said, holding up his hands innocently. Maya only pointed to her eyes and then back at him in response, and everyone chuckled. Okay, everyone ready? Maya asked, and everyone nodded. George blew a kiss to Marin from across the gym, and she winked at him and blew a kiss back. Then Cam signed to Ari that she was going down, but before she could respond, Maya blew the whistle with a shrill screech, and everyone burst into action. Ari knew that she could demolish the other team all by herself if she sifted, so she held back for the sake of fun and fairness. But between the projected physics and her natural athleticism, she was still a formidable opponent. She left the throwing to the rest of her team. She caught and dodged everything thrown at her, while still being able to protect Skylar as she ducked, pivoted, and slid. The robotic leg functioned perfectly for her, and she was having a blast moving so freely again. In a way, it reminded her of her sparring sessions with Kale back at Artemir. The realization of how much she actually missed Kale caused a momentary lapse in concentration, and unfortunately in that moment, a ball managed to graze her back. She looked over to see who'd thrown it, and saw Alvaro standing there frozen in shock that he'd actually been able to hit her. Wyatt took the opportunity to peg him in the shoulder, and he was out as well. Her team lost the first round, but they were able to redeem themselves by coming back strong and dominating in the second round. The third round decided the champion, so everyone was playing pretty cutthroat and showed no mercy. Ari was so busy making sure Skylar didn't get taken out by a high-velocity dodgeball that she didn't even realize they were the last 2 people left on the team. Miles yelled, "It's all up to you now, Ari," as he and Wyatt jogged off the court. "Oh, crap, really?" she said, turning back towards the other team. On the other side of the court stood Hugo, Cam, George, and somehow Taika, whose kamikaze antics had gotten him out pretty quickly in the first 2 rounds. They were all looking at her and Skylar smugly, like wolves eyeing their next meal. "We can do it, Ari!" Skylar shouted. Just as Ari looked down at her little teammate, all 4 of them launched their assault at them at the same time. Ari realized she wouldn't have enough time to protect Skylar from Taika's ball, which was unintentionally headed straight for Skylar's face, while dodging the other 3 balls aimed at her. So for the sake of Skylar's safety and the championship, she sifted, causing the balls to freeze in the air. She was able to change the direction of the force of all 4 balls to aim back towards their throwers. Once that was done, she slowed back down to real time to witness the surprised grunts and looks of shocks on the men's faces when they were all hit instead of her. Maya blew the whistle to signal the end of the game, and Ari's team exploded in cheers when they realized they had won, and came over to hug and pat Ari on the back. Taika let out one whiny, disappointed, "Not fair, she cheated," before he shook it off and joined his team in congratulating the winners. "Thanks for pulling your punches until the end," Hugo said to Ari with a friendly pat on the back, "and giving everyone else a chance." "No problem," she said with a chuckle. "But speaking of punches, I was wondering if I could join in on your sparring lessons in the evenings, now that I have my new leg." "Of course, we'd be glad to have you," he said, smiling. "We're skipping tonight because of Mara, but we're back on again tomorrow." "Awesome," she said, and then Cam came up behind her and lifted her up in a big hug. "That was a dirty trick, Pipes," he said while putting her down. "Brilliant, but dirty," he said with that impish grin of his. And for a second, she saw what Claudia must see in him. She had to admit that he was a really good-looking guy. "Well, they don't call me Ari Danger Pajamas for nothing," she joked, and they both broke out laughing. Suddenly, Claudia attacked him with a hug from the side, flashing her beautiful, perfect smile up at him. Suddenly, Claudia attacked him with a hug from the side, flashing her beautiful, perfect smile up at him. "Don't be a sore loser, baby. Maybe you'll beat us next time." "But I doubt it," she said with a wink. Baby, when did that start? Ari turned just in time to duck a ball kicked by Skylar, who had joined Taika in a frenetic game that only they knew the rules to. With the excitement over, everyone was filing away to other activities. And that's when Ari noticed that Soren wasn't in the gym area anymore. "Hey, Skylar," she called, and the little girl stopped mid-punt to look over at her. "Where'd Soren go off to?" Skylar shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know. He left before the game was over. He didn't want me to follow." She tossed the ball up, trying to kick it in the air, missed spectacularly, and fell to the ground. Why would he do that? Ari pushed out her field of energy sensitivity to try to locate him, and when she eventually found him, she latched on and felt his sadness. Ari couldn't stand that one of her minions was hurting, and had an overwhelming need to make it better. She followed the pole away from the gym area, through the halls, up the elevator to the second level, and towards the library. But she didn't find him in the stacks, which were usually devoid of people anyway. All the books had been digitized and were available on everyone's tablets and laptops. The only reason to come in here was for solitude, or if someone had a need to actually feel and smell a real book. Which, a side note here, digitized books are not a substitute for books. There's nothing better than an actual physical book. I hate reading books on the computer screen. That's not a book, that's an article at that point, a very long article. Books must persist. They must continue to be printed on cold, hard paper. It's my personal opinion of the matter. Sorry for the interruption. I don't usually interrupt in the middle of the books like that, but it had to be said. I love books and they need to stay in paper form. It's blasphemy. Blasphemy to have them digitized. Continuing on with this book. Following the pole in the path of Soren's energy signature towards the back of the library to the utility closet, she realized that if she hadn't been able to track him, she never would have thought to look for him here, which was probably the point. Looking through the door, she saw him huddled in the corner, sitting on an overturned bucket, with his head resting down on his forearms. His skin cuff was set to flashlight mode, illuminating a bright halo around his head, so he wasn't completely in the dark. Focusing in, she saw a tear fall down between his legs and hit the floor. "Aw, heck no. No crying, minions." Sifting the rest of the way to the door, she knocked on it gently so she wouldn't startle him. "Soren, it's me, Ari. What's wrong? Why are you in the utility closet?" Met with silence, she tried turning the handle, but it didn't budge, and she figured that he must have sealed the door shut. Taking a step back, she realized that there wasn't a space between the door and the door frame. It was all one solid piece. Somehow, he was able to manipulate the atoms into intermingling with each other, connecting the different pieces. It's barely showing my face. I feel like it's gotten worse. Ugh. It has gotten worse. Oh, that's gonna slip. Oh, settle down. There we go. Curious, she focused on where the gap between the door and the frame should be. The more she focused, the more her vision began to zoom in, and she could actually see what Soren had done. He had made the space solid by increasing the electromagnetic movement of the atoms to make it impossible for anything to get through. Ari concentrated on slowing down the electromagnetic activity. The different particles began to separate and retract back to their original form, and the gap reappeared. The effort had drained her energy, but she thought that it was totally worth it to find out that she could do this. Definitely a skill that could come in handy. Testing the handle again, she found that it turned smoothly for her, and she opened the door to see Soren looking at her with a shocked expression. "How'd you do that?" he asked, stunned. "I sealed it shut." Ari put her fingers to her lips while she came into the cramped closet and quietly closed the door behind her. "I figured it out," she said with a shrug, before turning on the flashlight mode on her cuff to give them more light. She tried to clear a big enough area on the floor to sit as she maneuvered around. It was tight, but she made it work with some creative contorting. Soren sniffed and wiped the tears from his face with the inside of his shirt. "I knew you were different from the first day you came here. I could feel it." "Feel what?" He only shrugged and looked down at his shoes. "You want to tell me what's wrong?" she asked gently. Keeping his eyes down, he let out a gusty sigh before saying, "You don't need me anymore." Another tear escaped and slid down the bridge of his nose. "Oh, little man." It tore at her heart to see him this upset. "What are you talking about? Of course I still need you." He shook his head, still refusing to look at her. "Not now that you have that," he said, pointing to her robotic leg, the metal reflecting their cuffs' lights in the darkness. "You don't need my help anymore, so you don't need me." His chin began to quiver in an effort to hold back more tears that threatened to overflow. Ari knew that this need to be useful in exchange for love stemmed from his parents, and it took everything she had to let her anger go. She couldn't stand seeing and feeling his heart-wrenching sadness anymore. She wanted to take him into her arms and envelop him with love and with her love and comfort, but there was no room in this tiny closet. So she took his pale, perfect little hand in her darker, scarred one instead, and infused him with her love that way. "Soren, look at me," she gently insisted. He reluctantly raised his eyes to meet hers. "I am always going to need you," she said sincerely, "and not because of any service you can do for me, but because I love you, and my love is unconditional." More tears spilled down his face, but she could tell that they weren't from sadness anymore. He knew she was telling the truth. "I meant what I said to you last night. I love you and Skylar like you're my own little brother and sister. I claimed you. You're family. You're mine. There's nothing you can do about it." There's nothing you can do about it, she said with a smile. He chuckled through his tears and then leaned forward and curled into a ball in the limited space in her lap and leaned into her. I claim you too, he whispered. I love you, Ari. You make everything better. I wish that was true, little man. With all my heart, I wish that was true, she thought. Ari wrapped her arms around him and kissed his head, and she felt his feelings of love, hope, and contentment blooming and radiating out. Just then, Ari sensed Cam and Claudia coming into the library, a second before she heard them talking and laughing. She and Soren both froze, looking through the door. Ari saw that Claudia had a hold of Cam's hand and was leading him to the space between the back wall and the last stacks of books, right where the utility closet was. Crap. I told you, nobody comes in here, Claudia said, turning back to Cam and looking up at him coquettishly. We have the place to ourselves. She grabbed the front of his shirt, pulling down to kiss her, which he gladly did. Crap, crap, crap. It was too late for her and Soren to escape the closet without it being unbearably awkward, so they'd just have to wait it out until they left. Ari felt like a peeping Tom looking through the door and watching them make out, so she stopped and focused back into the dark closet lit by their cuffs and Soren's radiant energy. But she could still hear them, and judging by the look on Soren's face, he didn't like it any more than she did. She put her hands over his ears to try and block out the slurpy kissing sounds, but he shook her hands off and brought her head down so he could whisper in her ear. Amp me as much as you can. I have an idea. Curious, Ari nodded and began focusing her energy into him. His bright, radiant energy immediately started getting brighter and brighter. He smiled and held up his hands as though he could feel the potential power in them. Then he slowly extricated himself from her lap, silently standing up. He held his hands up towards the back wall of the closet. He closed his eyes and began focusing his intent on the back wall, and she saw his energy start to manipulate the molecules in the wall, coaxing them to relax their rigidity. When they were perfectly in his control, he brought his hands together, and she saw his energy focus into an illuminated pinpoint on the wall. Then, as he slowly moved his hands apart, his illuminated energy dilated out in an expanding circle, creating a small hole in the wall to the hallway on the other side. Ari's mouth fell wide open. The more he concentrated and separated his hands, the more the hole expanded. Ari looked through the solid part of the wall because she felt another presence coming closer. She saw Marin and George coming down the hallway holding hands. Ari quickly realized they were surrounded, and she really didn't want to have to explain why they were escaping the closet via a hole in the wall. She mentally connected to Soren and thought to him, "Stop! Someone's coming!" Soren flinched in surprise at her voice in his head. He looked over at her, immediately putting a hold on what he was doing. He thought to her, "Keep amping me as much as you can." He smiled excitedly at her. "I want to see if I can do this. It feels like I can." "What?" "Keep amping me and you'll see." She poured even more of her energy into him, almost to the point where she was going to have to shield her eyes from his brightness. But before she did, she saw the hole widen and expand. To her surprise, instead of seeing the hallway on the other side, she saw it open to his and Skylar's bedroom. She could also see that Skylar was sitting on her bed amidst her animal toys, holding up her horse mid-gallop, staring at them with wide eyes, disbelief, and stunned silence. When the hole was a sufficient size for them to crawl through, Ari tapped him on the shoulder, and he stopped making it bigger. Even though he stopped concentrating on the energy surrounding the hole, it stayed in place as they carefully made their way through. As Soren followed behind her, his foot accidentally knocked the mop handle on his way out, causing it to fall over and crash into the bucket he'd been sitting on. They all flinched at the sound. Once safely on the other side, Soren held out his hands again, concentrating his energy. He brought his hands together, and the hole became smaller and smaller until it disappeared, and the wall they had come through was solid again. Just in time, too, because it looked as though the closet door was opening. They stood there staring at the wall, trying to wrap their minds around the fact that they had essentially just made a wormhole through the building. Ari broke her mental connection to Soren and stopped damping him. Unsealing the closet door and channeling so much of her energy into him had drained a lot out of her, and a wave of dizziness overtook her. She had to sit down on the floor before she fell over. "How'd you do that?" she asked while she put her head between her knees. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said. "The more power you gave me, the more I felt like I could do anything. I just thought really hard on where I wanted to go, and it just happened." He sat down next to her, his face beaming. "I told you that you make everything better." Alrighty, that was the end of long chapter 20. Ooh, that was a long one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That was a long one. But we finally made it through. Whoop, whoop. I've been alternating between reading chapters and grooming my dogs, so I think I'm gonna groom Romeo and then see about going to the next chapter. For now, thanks for joining us for chapter 20. See you back in chapter 21. Peace.